Hello, this is Malorian, and this is the Orc Tactical Team. And what we're going to be talking about today is a way that Orcs and Goblins can be taking on the tournament lists coming from Skaven. Now, right off the bat, this turns into be kind of vague because Skaven's one of those armies that there's so many different ways you can play the army, even at a high tournament level. You know, really, okay, I'm going to try and touch on the main things that they should all have, but just be kind of knowing that there could be a lot of other things out there as well. So usually the number one thing you're going to see is massive units of slaves. And this is where it turns into kind of a challenge for the Orcs and Goblins. Whereas the Chaos, it turned out to be that we were being beaten in combat, which is usually one of our strengths. Against Skaven, we're being out-hoarded. So we're the ones that are kind of like surrounding and have all the units and all the numbers. All of a sudden this is turned around. And slaves don't really sound all that dangerous. However, what they'll do is they'll just hit you with a big unit of 100 set up for ranks, and then once your big unit is stuck in combat, either they're doing that to bog you down forever, or because they can shoot into combat whenever the slaves are there, well, they're just going to start blasting you, and then that's when the warp fires start opening up, and it just gets nasty from there. So that by the time that even if you do beat those rats, they hold you down until you're decimated and beaten, or something else comes in to beat you. So that's a big problem right there. Another big problem is going to be their magic. They have some really good spells. Things like the dreaded 13th spell can really catch you off guard, and all of a sudden it can be that if a unit that you have your general and BSB in, if they get caught by that, bam, them and the unit get turned into rats. I remember there was one game I was in where I had a bunker of my 20 Night Goblin Archers, and I had my BSB and my General, and one spell later, bam, all of them were dead except for my General. And I got lucky there because at least he was alive. But I mean, really, not only would they be all dead, but also there'd be a unit of rats in the back of my line. So I mean, it's just a crazy deadly spell. As far as countering that one, that's fairly easy. All you really need to do is make sure that your BSB and your General are in very large units. You don't have to worry about it passing over to them. But just like I always say, in 8th, bigger is better. So if you're used to taking things like small units of Black Orcs or things, against Skaven, you want to be big, because either way you're going to be losing lots of models, but at least if it doesn't kill the entire unit, then you don't have this extra unit of clan rats as well that's going to be on your flank, rear, wherever, just somewhere being in real trouble. Going back to these slaves and the way that we're going to be dealing with them is, first of all, we're going to have to deploy some tactics to kind of break this up. First of all, you might be trying to do something like deploying more in one corner so that you don't have to be worrying about them surrounding you. Another thing I talked about before about the arrowhead deployment, and what that does is you have one unit facing this way, another unit facing this way, and of course set up so that nothing can come down the center. But what that happens is that when they charge, their lines go like this, which not only opens up flank attacks for you, but it can also act as a block to their own support unit. So if they had like a hell pit following from behind, all of a sudden now he's blocked. So those are a few things you want to do. And another thing is, it could just be just get in there and kill them. You're gonna have to deal with these slaves anyway. So take your units of, whether it's Night Goblins with your characters, or if you have an Orc unit, whatever, just get in there and start killing them. Start off in horde formation. When they go down a bit, go for more ranks. Yes, any models that are in combat have to stay in base contact, and usually what that means is that you still will have to stay with the 6 or so there, but you just go with that for ranks, just to get a few more to try and take that steadfast away. And one interesting thing you can kind of do against a slave-heavy army is just go in there, beat those slaves, and then hopefully by that time, if you can delay the rest of their army by doing things like that arrowhead, well, then all of a sudden you can say, well, there you go. Those slaves aren't a lot of points, but at least I got my 100 points. I win the game. So you can kind of work that little bit there. Another thing with the magic, make sure that you have a lot of anti-magic. Of course, you're going to have that spirit totem. You're going to want to have the dispel scroll to try and stop that 13th spell if it comes off. But then we start getting to some of the things where things diverge. they have some really big beast. They have the Hell Pit Abomination, and now that they actually have a model for it, you're going to be seeing that a lot. So you better be ready to face this thing. And Orcs and Goblins really don't have a lot of places to get flaming attacks. I mean, really, there's only the banner that gives you flaming attacks, or you can take the Wizard's Hat and just hope you get the Lore of Fire. So a lot of times, it's just not thing you can even really depend on. I've seen some people where their idea is that you put the flaming banner on a BSB, join them to some archers or something, shoot them, take away regen, and then use your war machines to finish them off. But the problem with that is that because of the storm banner, I would never rely on shooting as a reliable strategy. So really looking at the Hell Pit Abomination, it seems that the best way to deal with them is again the good old unit of the big unit of Night Goblins with a bunch of characters in there with great weapons. And the reason being for that is that the Hell Pit doesn't actually pick out models. A lot of the attacks are just against either whatever models it's touching or the entire unit for the Thunderstomp, meaning that they can't really just kind of like kill those bosses off automatically. Some of its attacks will be either ones go against the unit for its random one. There's another one where everybody takes an initiative test that's in base, but Night Goblins have a pretty good initiative anyway. And then there's another one, the feed one, that could really hurt. It's a strength 6 right off the bat, and it does D3 wounds. So, there you're almost kind of just hoping that they just go and get one wound, or they'd fail to wound. And really there, your nets can help, because at least the nets would make it going from strength 6 being to a strength 5. So at least then they're wounding you on a 3+. But really, that's the way that I think that'd be the best way to go about it. If you can get any shooting in before combat, that's great. But in the end, I think it's going to be, a handful of big bosses in a unit of Night Goblins. It's just going to slowly hack them down. And while we're on the Hell Pit Abomination, a big thing you have to start looking for out now in the Orc and Skaven army is the synergy. Because whereas Skaven or the slaves are not dangerous by themselves, they have the ranks to take away steadfast. If Skaven pair up slaves with Hell Pit, that is a deadly combination. And so as the Orc and Goblin player, you have to be very careful to make sure that you do not allow them to keep these being together. Whether it is that arrowhead tactic to try and separate them, whether it's some throwaway trolls or something to try and split the units, or making sure to jump into combat with the HPA right away and then try and hit the slaves or something else just to hold them up. Make sure that they're not bringing to bear both these things at the same time, because if they get into you, you are in big trouble. Some other things to look out for is, of course, all the weapon teams, right? They're going to have all the plague mortars, they're going to have all the warp fire throwers, and these things can hurt, but they can be very easy to kill. The problem from the Orc and Goblin unit is that we're not wood elves or something with a bunch of separate shooting. So what I like having is the wolf chariots. Wolf chariots have short bows, so you get 3 shots, so you can use them to try and shoot these things down. And if that doesn't work, you can always use the chariots to be charging these support units, whether they be the units of the weapons teams, whether it's being going forward to go after the other ones like the plate catapult or the warp lightning cannon, or even just something for adding punches to combat. It just seems to be a great thing to be using against the Skaven. So whereas boar chariots are usually my favorite because they have the better toughness, another wound, blah blah blah. Against Skaven, I'd really go for the wolf chariots just because they have that shooting as well, so that you can try and take out these weapon teams before you move in, and then you can do your big hit. Another thing, of course, you have to watch out for are those stupid units of his gutter runners that are going to have slings that are poisoned. These things are amazingly dangerous. They scout behind your lines. They take out war machines like nothing. They can even destroy your chariots like nothing, and they're very hard to deal with. The best thing that I find that's actually to try and keep them away is actually pump wagons, because they can't choose to shoot or flee or anything against that movement. So if you put those pump wagons on either side of your line, that's going to force them to either ignore the rest of your force and go after these cheap pump wagons, or to move forward and go after your war machines that would be more central and have to take the risk that, well, this thing's going to hit me and probably wipe me out in one blow. Of course, if you ever get any magic missiles or anything, you can be blasting that, but otherwise, I mean, these things, when they're your rear, it almost gets to the point where you just can't turn around because you're outnumbered, so you just have to keep on walking forward and fight the good fight while you're just getting poisoned to death in the back. So never, get lost in thinking that you have to turn around with a big block of yours to deal with them, unless this is late in the game. Another thing to be looking for is if they actually go for something like the bell on their magic caster. Just know that this is a great way for us to actually kill them, because I would be just gunning to get into that unit with combat with that unit right away. Don't make a challenge, and just have all those guys with regular attacks attacking the Grey Seer. One thing that's going to really suck though in 8th is that unless you destroy that actual bell as well, you're not getting any points. But at least as long as he's not casting any magic, that's a big thing right off the bat. Past this, another big thing that seems to be very common is having the Storm Vermin Horde. Right here, they have halberds. They don't seem all that great by themselves. When you get them into a horde, and when they get death frenzied, these guys can be insanely tough, and they're even core. Another thing you'll see is when they get the special character in there, so they get the +1 strength and +1 weapon skill. I mean, these things can just be amazingly tough to beat. The only thing that's in your advantage is that for Skaven, this is a very expensive unit, especially when you have that special character in there that's giving them the upgrade as well. So if you ever see this, you should at that point be in a spot where you have more units than him to deal with it, and you can start dealing with things like trying to redirect it and hit the flank, or trying to just bog it down, or just something. And really, it's really going to be that in Skaven, as far as blocks go, this is going to be the only block you need to avoid. So as long as you can just stall that one and deal with the rest, you're going to be fine. And again, it's usually a thing too that they put slaves or something in front of it to make sure you don't just blast it. Well, if they ever do that, just walk in front of the slaves and then block them, because once you get in combat, they're kind of stuck there until the slaves are gone. So it's a great way to kind of use their own screen against them. Past this, you never know what other things they might have. They might have Jezzails, they might have, what do you call them, the Doom Wheels, things like that. In each of them, we're getting to the point where it's just so hard to try and decide what you're going to have in your army to beat them, just because there's so many different options they're going to have. I would still have a little bit of you shooting in there, just to try and take some wounds off things like the Rat Ogres or the Doom Wheel before combat. Again, I said before that you can't trust it, but the nice thing about things like Spear Chuck is that they're so cheap that you might as well throw a handful of them in there anyway, and then if you do face something, you can always be lucky and try and do as many wounds as you can before that banner goes off, or maybe the banner won't even last long. Doom Wheels, it seems the best way to deal with them if you don't have shooting is, again, just going with those characters inside the Night Goblins, right? Just get them to combat and hack them down, because all the impacts and things are going to be against the unit, and they won't last long against all those great weapons. If you're against something like a Rat Ogre Horde, that can again be a very, very dangerous unit, and really the best thing you can do there, if they're away from the general, look out for that. If you can go and shoot enough and kill the handler so that becomes stupid, it could be you never even have to even deal with this unit. If it's central and there's a big unit of them, again, just like with the Storm Vermin, try and find ways to bog them down, slow them down. Again, if they have anything in the front of it, like the slaves, and like I said before, you can always be receiving charges so that those slave units are shifting over and then blocking the Rat Ogres or whatever it is. So to try and sum this up, there's so many different things that Skaven can throw at you, but the main things are going to be that they're going to outnumber you. Make sure that you are well versed in being able to deal with being outnumbered and how to use those things to your advantage. Things like I didn't mention using terrain. If you can bring fights into woods or something so that they lose steadfast, your orcs are going to beat their rats and then you can run them down that way. It's just a totally different game for orcs. We're used to being outnumbered. And then again, for their big monsters, it just seems to be again that you need to go with those big units of Night Goblins with lots of big bosses with great weapons. So there you have it. And next time I'm actually going to be dealing with something else. I'm going to be talking about how to use spiders in 8th. So see you then. Bye.